Okay, welcome back. I'm Jeremiah Adams here with Eileen Maddox and Peter Terry, and this is the third series of the Holy Bible, the Pentateuch, Genesis to Deuteronomy. This is the third episode of this series. So, who's first? Is that you, Peter?
Yes.
Yes.
Please go ahead and start. Thank you.
So welcome everybody. Every day, observant Jews, and that would be all Orthodox Jews, all conservative Jews, Mazorti is what they're called in Hebrew, and then a fair number also of Reform Jews will say or chant or listen to a recording of or listen to a cantor chant what is called, it's a passage from the book of Deuteronomy that is part of the prayer. It's regarded as really the heart of the prayer. And it is a part of the prayer that is actually cited by Jesus when he speaks about what is the essence of the message of the Torah, of the Pentateuch. That's what it is. So first I'm going to say the text in Hebrew, so you get a bit of the sound of the language, which is quite different from English. Actually, I'll begin with the English. The English, blessed be the name of the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. And actually, that's not right because there's text problems, underlay problems. The actual original is Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Lord is used in the place of the unmentionable name of God, which is spelled YHVH. The words in Hebrew are Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And I'm going to chant it. When cantors chant it, they improvise. I will not do a very complicated improvisation. I've been more influenced by the Ashkenazi tradition of Europe than the Sephardi or Moroccan tradition. So my singing is going to be somewhat like that. And then I will, after I recite this, I will recite also Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, which is a verse that was interpolated, added into the prayer by the rabbis to bless the name of God. And then the first sentence, which is the sentence that you know, if you have read the Gospels, you know this very well, because Jesus recites it and said, this is the essence of Torah, along with loving your neighbor as yourself, which is a quotation from Leviticus. And it runs like this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Shema Yisrael Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed ואהבת את אדוני אלוהינו מכל לבבך, מכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. Eileen, you're on.
Can you please unshare? Okay, here we are. The announcements are few and far between this week. We are going to plow our way through the holiday weekends so that we can finish before January starts. I think this is the holiday weekend for Thanksgiving, and there will be a holiday weekend for Christmas, but we will just keep going. Now, I have put both our email addresses in the chat box. If you would like to receive the weekly newsletter by email about the course, which gives all sorts of links and information and what have you, just please send me an email. And I did a program on Joseph 4 or 5 months ago at the exploration session at 11 o'clock. So under Joseph, I have put the link so that you can screen it for yourself. I'm not going to repeat it here in the Pentateuch sessions since I presented it so recently. And the same thing for symbology, Egypt symbology. Next week, I'm going to do a major program on the Exodus from a historical viewpoint. But previously, very recently, I did a program on the symbolism aspect of Egypt. And so you can cut and paste that also and screen it. And I've also listed the books of mine that are available for purchase at substantial discount. And that's up to you, of course. And having said all that, let's get on with the program. I click share. I click the PowerPoint. I click the slideshow. I click the first slide, which is actually the second. Here's the first slide. And we are set to go. Hammurabi and Moses, progress to justice. Today we will delve into the evolution of law and order, in particular moral law and its progression towards justice, starting with the Code of Hammurabi, which is a Babylonian legal text composed about 1750 BC. The Code of Hammurabi is the longest, best organized, best preserved legal text from the ancient Near East. It was written in the Old Babylon dialect of Akkadian, and Hammurabi was the king at that point. We will follow the development of moral law from Hammurabi to Abraham to Moses. Now, this talk was inspired by my pet peeve of hearing people dismiss the Hebrew Bible by citing an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, meaning that the Hebrew Bible is primitive and irrelevant today. Not so, as we shall see. Every society, whether primitive or modern, has its code of laws, whether simple or complex, oral or written. The American jurist Joseph Bradley wrote, "Society cannot exist without law. Law is the bond of society, that which makes it, that which preserves it and keeps it together. It is, in fact, the essence of civil society. A society's legal code, whatever form it takes, reflects the nature of that society, its values, and expectations of its citizens." As we discussed a couple of weeks ago, the Neolithic Revolution started in the Near East, in today's southeast Turkey, and first spread south in the Levant to the land of Canaan before 9000 BC. The Neolithic Revolution then spread east through the Levant to northern Mesopotamia, about 9000 to 7000 BC, and to southern Mesopotamia, to the Persian Gulf, about 7 to 5000 BC. And the people became subsistence farmers in a fertile, warm region. The advent of the prophet Adam was about 4000 BC, which we also talked about recently in a previous episode. In the time of the first manifestation, the primal will appeared in Adam. He probably taught the Neolithic villagers who lived between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Mesopotamia. The land was gentle and fertile. The people lived simply, growing crops, and probably still hunting and gathering a bit, and they probably had a reasonable level of social equality. As a manifestation of God, Adam's advent released spiritual energy that catalyzed tremendous religious, cultural, and civilizational development. The extreme extent and speed of this civilizational transformation would not be seen again until the progress catalyzed by the Baha'i dispensation. Mesopotamia came to be called the cradle of civilization for the West. Formal codes of law emerged, the latest that we know about being the Code of Hammurabi. Let's quickly review the spiritual seasons that were also explained a couple of weeks ago, because the concept is vitally important to the times after Adam and the times after Moses. The coming of a manifestation of God, a divine teacher like Adam, Abraham, and Moses, releases the spiritual springtime of new life. The power of springtime becomes visible with freshness and new growth, with new teachings infusing the hearts and minds of the people. This is also reflected in extraordinary progress in the arts and sciences, in culture, and civilizational advancement. Spring is followed by the divine summer of fruition, the consolidation of the new teachings and the maturation of spring's efforts with the apex of a culture's moral development. Inevitably, in time comes the autumn, when the essence of the prophet's teachings have been mostly forgotten, remembered primarily through folklore and mythology. Man's interpretations undermine the original teachings of the prophet. Corruption and perversion start creeping into society. Winter is that desolate time of the perversion of religion, of systemic corruption and immorality. Winter is when the truths of the divine dispensation have either been entirely forgotten or ignored, and when war, materialism, gross spiritual inequality, and other social ills prevail. They not only prevail, but they are accepted as normal. The winter in Mesopotamia featured rigid social stratification with three classes. First, the king, nobility, and priests. Second, a small middle class of artisans and merchants, and some freedmen, and at the bottom, the slaves. Strict social codes like the Code of Hammurabi were designed to maintain this social order. warfare developed, aided by new instruments of war, such as the chariot. Humans were now domesticated into slavery and other forms of subservience, a process that is sometimes called hyperdomestication that has continued to this day. Great empires were built on warfare, and that continues today. Religion had become extreme polytheism with over 2,000 gods and goddesses. The Code of Hammurabi, which is a compilation of Mesopotamian case law about 1750 BCE. Enter Hammurabi, king of Babylon, ruling from Babylon. Hammurabi greatly expanded his kingdom to take control of ancient Mesopotamia, but he is mostly remembered for his law code of 282 laws. There had been previous codes to govern commerce and agriculture, to compensate victims of crime, and to punish violators of the law, and to keep the social order. Law and order, that's what it was about. Hammurabi's code was a compilation of case law decisions made during his reign that gives excellent insight into his society's social structure and values. The Code of Hammurabi was inscribed on a 4-ton slab that you see on the left, set up in the temple of Marduk, the god of Babylon. This is the only source for the code available today. It was discovered in 1901 in Susa, the capital of the ancient province Elam, in today's Iran. This stela is now in the Louvre in Paris. The top of the stela shows Hammurabi on the left, receiving the law from Shamash, the Babylonian god of justice, and there's a close-up on the right. Shamash was the sun god and the god of justice and equity. The code has 3 sections: an introduction, the body of 282 case laws, and an epilogue. Here is one excerpt from the introduction to give you the flavor. Winabu, the sublime, and Bel, the Lord of heaven and earth, assigned to Marduk, who was a deity of Babylon, called by name me, Hammurabi, to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so that the strong should not harm the weak, and enlighten the land, to further the well-being of mankind. We see here that the code was intertwined with the gods. The code is the longest, best organized, best preserved legal text from the ancient Near East. It is primarily secular, although crimes against temple properties are taken seriously. Here's a quick run through the high points. The format is if-then. If you do this, then that will happen to you. The code was uniform throughout the empire. It was posted in all the villages. The code admitted no claim that was not substantiated by documents or the oath of witnesses. That sounds good. The code assumes innocence until proven guilty. That sounds good. The code allowed for vicarious punishment. That does not sound good. Vicarious punishment, an example of vicarious punishment would be if a high-class man killed another man's slave, then a slave of the killer would be killed, even though that slave wasn't guilty of anything. It had nothing to do with the incident. There was a strong emphasis on making the victim whole. That sounds good. Capital punishment and bodily mutilations were common punishments, not so good, especially since the slaves had no money to pay for restitution, so they got the worst of it. The laws of retribution, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. The laws and punishment were set according to social class and gender. They mandated fixed wages for various classes of labor. Economic changes were not anticipated. The code's purpose was social stability through stasis. Social change was not anticipated. Nay, it would not have been tolerated. And the code reflected a cyclical view of time without anticipation of change. Its purpose was to keep the social order as it was. No affronts to the deities are mentioned, nor any specific worship or sacrificial obligations. This code was secular. Okay, the rules of commerce, agriculture, and what we would call warranties on work done were covered extensively. Here are 3 examples. If anyone hire a field laborer, he shall pay him 8 gur of corn per year. 1 gur equaled 800 US gallons, or maybe 12 shekels. There seems to be no adjustment allowed for inflation. Maybe there was no inflation as we know it. If anyone hire a skilled artisan, he shall pay as wages 5 gerahs, as wages of the potter 5 gerahs, of a tailor 5 gerahs, of a rope maker 4 gerahs per day. 1 gerah equaled 1/20th of a shekel. This was not a competitive market economy. Prices were expected to remain the same forever. If a shipbuilder build a boat for someone and do not make it tight, if during that same year that boat is sent away and suffers injury, the shipbuilder shall take the boat apart and put it together tight at his own expense. The tight boat he shall give to the boat owner. That is a warranty law. Many crimes were punishable by death, but a lot depended on the social class of the person accused and that of the victim. I counted at least 25 crimes punishable by death. Here are 4 of them that are quite representative. If anyone bring an accusation of any crime before the elders and does not prove what he has charged, he shall, if it be a capital offense charged, be put to death. If a builder build a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which he built fall in and kill its owner, then that builder shall be put to death. If conspirators meet in the house of a tavern keeper, and these conspirators are not captured and delivered to the court, the tavern keeper shall be put to death. If anyone is committing a robbery and is caught, then he shall be put to death. Most of the cases for capital punishment seem very harsh to us, and too harsh to be called justice. But at least everyone knew what the laws were. And the robber should have thought about that before he committed robbery. Mutilation, bodily mutilation, was a common punishment, but again, largely applicable according to social class. If a son of a paramour or a prostitute say to his adoptive father or mother, "You are not my father or my mother," his tongue shall be cut out. If a son strike his father, his hands shall be hewn off. If the slave of a freed man, that means someone who was born in slavery but was freed, strike the body of another freed man, his ear shall be cut off. If anyone agree with another to tend his field, give him seed, entrust a yoke of oxen to him, and bind him to cultivate the field, if he steal the corn or plants and take them for himself, his hands shall be hewn off. If a slave say to his master, "You are not my master," if they convict him, his master shall cut off his ear. Mutilation specific to eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The original source for eye, tooth for tooth, in context, social class will be shown in blue and the punishments will be shown in red. You will see the class system and unequal punishments. If a freeborn man strike the body of another freeborn man or equal rank, he shall pay 1 gold mina, which is 60 shekels. If a freedman strike the body of another freedman, he shall pay 10 shekels in money. Note the difference between a freeborn man and a freed man. A freeborn man was born free. A freedman had been born a slave and was of lower status, and it does get complicated. If the slave of a freed man strike the body of a freed man, his ear shall be cut off. If a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. If he break another man's bone, his bone shall be broken. If he put out the eye of a freed man or break the bone of a freed man, he shall pay 1 gold mina. If he put out the eye of a man's slave or break the bone of a man's slave, he shall pay 1/2 of its, the slave's value. If a man knock out the teeth of his equal, his teeth shall be knocked out. If he knock out the teeth of a freedman, he shall pay 1/3 of a gold mina, 20 shekels. Mutilation seems to apply between 2 men of the same class or to people of lower classes. Fines are applied if the perpetrator was of a higher class than the victim. Okay, mutilation for physicians. This is a little bit bloody, and it comes down hard on doctors. Again, you see the stark social hierarchy reflected in the compensation for victims. Again, words in blue refer to money payments. Words in red refer to money payments, and words in blue refer to social class. If a physician make a large incision with an operating knife and cure it, or if he open a tumor over the eye with an operating knife and saves the eye, he shall receive 10 shekels in money. If the patient be a freed man, he receives 5 shekels. And if he be the slave of someone, his owner shall give the physician 2 shekels. If a physician make a large incision with the operating knife and kill him, or open a tumor with the operating knife and cut out the eye, his hands shall be cut off. So consider your career choice carefully. If a physician make a large incision in the slave of a freedman and kill him, he shall replace the slave with another slave. Now, in all of the foregoing that I have cited from the Code of Hammurabi, I found no provisions for mercy or intercessions for mercy. The epilogue. Here are two excerpts from the epilogue. The king who ruleth among the kings of the cities am I. This is Hammurabi speaking. My words are well considered. There is no wisdom like unto mine. By the command of Shamash, the great judge of heaven and earth, let righteousness go forth in the land. By the order of Marduk, my lord, let no destruction befall my monument. In future time, through all coming generations, let the king who may be in the land observe the words of righteousness which I have written on my monument. Let him not alter the law of the land which I have given, the edicts which I have enacted. My monument let him not mar. The code's purpose was stasis, change nothing, ever. However, God got the last laugh, and he's probably still laughing, because along came Abraham. The prophet Abraham emerged from Mesopotamia and challenged polytheism and taught monotheism. The plan of God moves forward no matter what kings decree. A young man named Abram in the city of Ur mocked his deities, the deities. And here on the map, you see this is where Ur is. And he went all the way up to Haran. And then in response to a message from God, he went to the land of Canaan. Briefly down to Egypt and back again. Abraham would bring a new dispensation from God and trigger a spiritual spring. Although 15 chapters of Genesis are devoted to Abraham, there is little about he actually taught the people in Canaan. Although we know that his legacy was monotheism, and we know of the covenants that were made with God, or that God made with him, that the land of Canaan would belong to his descendants. The promises to Abraham, the covenant is given several times, but this is a very inclusive one. As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. You will no longer be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham. For I have made you father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be your God. And of course, there was the flip side to this covenant, that the people would obey the Lord's laws, which they didn't. And that's one of the primary themes of the Pentateuch. The many nations are the adherents of Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and the Baha'i faith. Here are the 2023 figures for the adherents of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Baha'i faith. The highest is 31% for Christianity, Christians, 49.9% of the world's population are Muslim, call it 25%, 0.2% are Jewish, and 0.07% are Baha'i, which adds up to 56% of the world's population are the spiritual descendants of Abraham. The Lord promised Abraham several times that the land of Canaan would belong to his descendants. Today, that land includes the state of Israel, where the Baha'i World Center is located in Haifa, about 20 miles south of the Lebanese border. In the world of God, there is no time. Past, present, and future are one. For that reason, and I'm not going to go into politics, I think it's safe to assume that Israel will defend itself successfully and succeed in defending the Baha'i World Center, although there will be much suffering in that country, Israel. The greatest teaching of Abraham was monotheism. Abdu'l-Baha wrote, "The founder of monotheism was Abraham. It is to him that this concept can be traced, and the belief was current among the children of Israel even in the days of Socrates." Abdu'l-Baha made a profound statement in his book, Foundations of World Unity, in a section called Foundation of Religion. He commented on the regrettable animosity among men over religion, and he wrote not only that the foundations of divine religion are one and the same, but His Holiness Abraham was the founder of reality, which I think means the one God. His Holiness Moses, His Holiness Christ, His Holiness Muhammad were the manifestations of reality. His Holiness Baha'u'llah was the glory of reality. This is not simply an assertion, it will be proved. And I think according to this, we can assume that the prophet Adam did not teach monotheism as we know it today, because the people of that time were not ready for it. Abdu'l-Baha listed the results of Abraham's exile, which became the cause of the progress of Abraham's descendants in their being given the Holy Land, resulted in the diffusion of Abraham's teachings, in the appearance of a Jacob from the seed of Abraham and of a Joseph who became the ruler in Egypt, resulted in the appearance of a Moses from that same seed and the appearance of a being such as Christ from that lineage, resulted in a Hagar being found, of whom Ishmael was begotten, and from whom Muhammad in turn descended, resulted in the appearance of the Bab from the lineage of Abraham, in the appearance of the prophets of Israel from the progeny of Abraham. And so will it continue forevermore. And it resulted in the whole of Europe and most of Asia entering under the shadow of the God of Israel. Behold, What a power it was that enabled an immigrant to establish such a family, to found such a nation, and to promulgate such teachings. It behooves us to ponder a while that if the immigration of Abraham from Ur to Aleppo in Syria produced such results, what will be the effect of the exile of Baha'u'llah from Tehran to Baghdad, to Constantinople, to Edirne, and to the Holy Land? Abraham is remembered more for his covenants with God than for his laws. But Abdu'l-Baha wrote this very interesting comment about Abraham, about bodily mutilation. The background is too long and complicated to give, but the quotation stands by itself. Abdu'l-Baha said, "Nevertheless, it is a fact, attested by the writings of all the Islamic schools, that the months of truth, the lunar calendar, and the cutting off of the right hand as punishment for theft formed no part of Abraham's law. In any case, the Pentateuch is extant and available today and contains the laws of Abraham. Let them refer to it." The prophet Moses. Now we will look for the context for eye, tooth for tooth in Mosaic law. In Latin, this law of retaliation is called lex talionis, and it appears 3 times, one each in the covenant code, in the book of Exodus, in the holiness code, in the book of Leviticus, and in the Deuteronomic code, in the book of Deuteronomy. We'll look at each of these 3 mentions within their context and the essence of Mosaic law. As we remember what the Code of Hammurabi said, and now considering what Mosaic law said, it's important to keep in mind that there were no police back then, no prisons, no rehab centers, no halfway houses, no understanding of mental illness, no psychological therapy. Security within nomadic communities and small villages was paramount. There were no keys to lock your doors. Trust and justice were foundational to social order. The covenant code immediately follows the 10 commandments in the book of Exodus, which we will be looking at next week. It's several chapters long. The major difference we will see is that since Mosaic law came from God, transgressions were now sins. Mosaic law was divine. Hammurabi's was secular. Mosaic law applied to everyone equally, regardless of social status. Hammurabi's was applied according to social status. We are now going to cut with a fine knife through the covenant code to find the context for eye, tooth for tooth. We will cover the covenant code in far more detail in a future episode in this series. Capital punishment. Following the same format we use for the Hammurabi Code, here's what I found for punishment in the Covenant Code. This is a much shorter list. down from 25 to 7, I believe. And it's important to realize that punishments were not determined by social caste. Murder, unless unintentional, attacks on father or mother, curses to father or mother, kidnapping a fellow Israelite to sell as a slave. If, because of an owner's negligence, a bull gores a person to death, unless a slave, the owner shall be put to death, but sometimes restitution could be arranged instead. Bestiality and idolatry. The covenant code set a moral code far beyond the limitations of the Hammurabi Code. Here are a few of the do nots. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. How appropriate this advice seems to us today in the U.S. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. Do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Do not deny justice to your poor people in their lawsuits. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. Oh my, this is so applicable to our society today. Mutilation, and here is the eye for eye, tooth for tooth in context. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. However, there are no recorded incidents of mutilation in the book of Exodus. There are many examples of what we would call personal injury law, and they were resolved through restitution. The Holiness Code of Leviticus is 10 chapters, and we will use surgical precision to extract what we need to set the context for an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Following the format that I've been using, I found 10 capital crimes, most of them repeated from the Covenant Code. Added to them were sacrificing one's children to the god Moloch, practicing mediumship or spiritism, and blasphemy. Oh, and here we are again. Anyone who takes the life of a human being is to be put to death. Anyone who takes the life of someone's animal must make restitution, life for life. Anyone who injures their neighbor is to be injured in the same manner. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The one who has inflicted the injury must suffer the same injury. Now, this is quite explicit, but should the Hebrew Bible be dismissed because of this? Let's look at 3 other sets of verses from the Holiness Code of Leviticus. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. This is part of a safety net that Moses erected for the poor and dispossessed. It's also a forerunner of our modern safety nets that include food shelves and food stamps. The moral laws found in the Holiness Code are profound. You shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Sound familiar? We associate this with Jesus, who, as a prophet of God, taught this eternal verity. It first came from Moses. If you hear anyone dismissing the Hebrew Bible because of an eye for an eye, please remind them where love thy neighbor as thyself was first uttered. The Pharisees asked Jesus what was the most important law of Moses. They were hoping to trap him into theological arguments. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Moses set the moral bar at the ultimate level. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy." Ponder that. The Deuteronomic Code, 15 chapters long, and gives a partial repetition of the laws given in the previous codes. Again, following the format, I've only listed the capital offenses in the Deuteronomic Code that are new. If a prophet or one who foretells through dreams describes signs and wonders and says to follow other gods, that prophet or dreams must be put to death. Prophet of dreams must be put to death. Also, if anyone tries to entice others to turn to other gods, he must be put to death after thorough investigation. Idolatry, when witnessed by 2 or 3 people and after investigation, and showing contempt for the judge or the priest who makes a decision in a case brought to him. You must purge evil from Israel. And here we are again, the third time. If a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse someone of a crime, the 2 people involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priests and the judges who are in office at the time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and the witness proves to be a liar, giving false testimony against a fellow Israelite. Then do to the false prophet as that witness intended to do to the other party. You must purge the evil from you. The rest of the people will hear of this and be afraid, and never again will such an evil thing be done among you. Show no pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. In this case, though, it appears that this applies to persons only who give false testimony before the priests and the judges. Throughout the 3 codes, social class was never mentioned. follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. The end. Okay. Are we back to normal?
Do you want to stop the screen share?
Yes,
Okay.
I just did.
So I guess now would be a time for questions, if we have questions.
Yes, we can take a few. Let me go to the chat box and see what we have there. I do not see any questions in the chat box. We can take a couple quick ones if you'd like to raise your hand.
So from everyone in the audience that's here on Zoom, any questions?
Let me ask here. Okay, so Abraham was then from Haran down to Palestine, so to speak, right?
Right.
And then we switch over to Moses, coming out of Egypt, and then Palestine becomes the promised land because Abraham migrated there, right?
Right.
But in the Canaans were there already, right? So
Yes.
did God now say, "Oh, you are going to be the new occupiers"? Or how does that? How does?
Well, next week, when I do the program on the Exodus, I'm going to go into this. The short answer is the Hebrews probably were Canaanites originally. And many of the Canaanites became Hebrews or later Jews. So it's very complicated. Long story short, yes, there were lots of people living in the land, but the Canaanites were very advanced Neolithic people. They had amazing architecture and jewelry, and for a lot of reasons that I'll go into next week. And they also were ready to hear the message of monotheism. That's the short answer, and I'll go into it next week in depth, ad infinitum. Well, if no one else has a question, oh, Sue Emil, in the light of the revelation of Baha'u'llah, in the name of the Lord, we invoke today, this talk may interest you. Oh, she's giving us links to some interesting programs. Thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you. The reason I posted that was because I come from a Orthodox Jewish background, the Chabad movement. You may be familiar with it or not. They're the ones that wear the long curls on the side of their head.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And,
oh, yes.
You know, there are many, many, many sects in Judaism based on their interpretation of Torah. So they've created many schisms amongst themselves in the same way that Christianity has done and Islam and God forbid Baha'i would do that. We have the same covenant, but maybe we're more conscious today. We have the illumination of the revelation of Baha'u'llah that raises our consciousness to see, at least intellectually, the oneness, if we haven't achieved it physically, and we're on the way. So it's very pertinent to Israel, because I have very ancient ancestral heritage in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing ancestral trauma work, and because my father, feeling extremely burdened by being a Chabad Jew, among other Jews as well as the secular world, he chose not to follow that path when he left home, went to college,
Mm-hmm.
married my mother, who was not Jewish.
Oh my.
Yeah, oh my, that is a extreme no-no for especially the observant Chabad Jewish people. It's an extreme no-no.
That got him expelled from his family.
And I'm aware, both through the ancestral trauma that I carry in my genetic memory, I'm working on it, that Jews, even brothers, like if you take Jacob, who became Israel after struggling with the angel, he received his new name, which was Israel, meaning struggles with God, because God will have the last word. He has the first word and the last word and every word in between.
That's right.
And, you have this intermarriage and you have offspring. Even Abraham had offspring with a woman who wasn't so-called Jewish.
Right.
And so we see the schism today between brothers, half brothers, whose mothers, some are Jewish and some aren't. And I feel this very deep family conversation is necessary to even in Baha'u'llah's family.
Mm-hmm.
We had the severe schism between the half brothers and the full brother, and we had the schism, Abdul Baha and his relatives. I mean, and it comes down to my hurt was my Jewish family did not accept me as their flesh and blood because my mother wasn't Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I haven't had a rabbi of any tradition who can explain to me why. And I said, I've even had my DNA done. My father is my father. If that's the question, that because you don't know who the father is when it's your mother, well, I've had my DNA done and my father's my father. So why aren't I considered Jewish? And I'm in a study group with a group of Chabad ladies.
Okay.
And they one of the and I discussed this with them. They couldn't explain it to me. But this one lady sent me this particular recording that I posted here, where I said, this may be of interest. She said to me, it may be of interest to you because it speaks to your question about heritage. And I was, because I'm a Baha'i now, and I don't have the question at the highest level, I still have that question at the emotional level for being rejected by my own family.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
And
Sue,
we have to move
quick
along.
question that we need to move on to. I apologize.
Yes. Let's move on now to Peter.
Joseph has a question and he says, why are there more names of God, YHWY, if there is only one WHYA?
Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my. To answer that question, I would have to go into what's called the documentary hypothesis, which I might go into during the last episode of this series. It's a very complicated answer, and I'm sorry that I just can't answer that question for you. But the fact that God was called by many different names in no way suggests that he was anything other but the one God.
Well, you said that there was some Mosaic code about don't worship the god Mabalaku. Da da da. So I don't remember what the name was. Abarak.
Okay, what did you say?
Up close.
There was a Mosaic code that explicitly said, "Do not worship God Morbarak."
I don't understand.
It was a name. It's like God something.
Never mind.
Okay, never mind.
Sorry. So before we move on, you're saying, Eileen, that this is a longer conversation and maybe that
Yes.
can be discussed next Sunday at 11 a.m., which will be
Maybe Peter can answer it.
right.
That would be a very good question for Peter. Poor Peter. And now it's time for Peter to come on board and talk with us. Okay, Peter?
Sure. Thank you, Eileen. Very wonderful presentation. Very you see, one of the reasons why Eileen and I have decided to do this together is we learn from each other. We've gone at this research from very different points of view, and that means we have a whole lot to learn from each other. It's great. It's terrific. It's I think you're talking about Malach, but in any case, we'll both of us can address this maybe next week, so that we have a little time to refresh our memories of the biblical verses. But clearly, the Israelites were differentiating themselves from their neighbors, and the reason why this differentiation was occurring was, among other things, because if you don't differentiate yourself and then you don't stick with your differentiation, you disappear. You disappear. This is something actually Baha'u'llah advised us about. And I said and the Guardian talked about it as well, is don't be afraid of being distinctive, because the worst thing you want to be is like everybody else. If you're like everybody else, then who's going to teach the faith? Not you, because you're like everybody else. Why should they become Baha'is? What they need to see is that the Baha'is are different, and different is already something very attractive. And then of course, hopefully better, in terms of our behavior and our attitudes. So it's my turn, and I'm going to share a document simply, and I'm going to do this simply because I think it will be easier for you to keep track of things. That's if I can find this document. I have a very hard time sometimes on my laptop because I have so many things that are there, and I think it's this one. Is this one? No, it's not that one. So just give me a minute while I fish around and get the right document ready for you to look at. All right? Just take me a minute here. Among other things, because I want to look at it. So 1 second. Let's see. There we go. No, there we go. Marvelous. Okay, so you will see now. Is everyone seeing this now? There's a list of 5 numbers with topics.
No, we're not seeing it.
You're not seeing it. Oh, okay. Well, then let me go back. Probably what happened was I didn't properly share. Let's see. Share. There we go. Can you see it now?
It's loading.
No, there
Yeah,
we go.
now it's there.
Oh, it's loading.
Now it's showing now.
Is it loaded now?
Yes.
Okay, okay. All right, so I'm going to try to do my best to cover these five topics relatively quickly so that you will have time to ask questions. And how much time do we have, Jeremiah?
We have a little less than 45 minutes.
Okay, excellent. All right. So the first topic, briefly, is about Adam. All right. And I wanted to share with you that beginning with the Jewish tradition, Adam has multiple identities. And Adam, by the way, is a word which means man, Adam. And the man would be Ha-Adam. And so we should, although we're used to thinking of Adam as this personality who had a wife named Eve, who, lived in the Garden of Eden and get booted out. So, but that's only one of the stories of Adam. And it starts out with Jewish tradition. In Jewish tradition, there are many people who are called Adam and others who are called Ben Adam, which means the same thing, son of man. And the son of man, in the sense of a human being, is found, for example, in the 25th chapter of Job and in Psalm 146. Also, referring to the common man is the expression or the term ish. And ish also meant husband, because the first ish who's talked about, who's referred to as ish, is Adam. And in the book of Genesis, in the second chapter, Adam is married to Eve. He is the husband of Eve. And Eve, her name is Isha, which meant both woman and wife. And in the book of Hosea, chapter 2, verses 16, 19, and 20, there's references to this being wife, the use of Isha as wife. So these meanings, generic meanings of both Adam and Eve, are found in the Bible itself, okay, as well as the specifics that have to do with that certain story that we're all familiar with the Garden of Eden. Now, when there is a reference to the maleness of a man and the femaleness of a woman, the terms that are usually used are zecher and nekiva. Those are the two terms used in Hebrew. So as far as who might Adam be besides this generic human being and the biblical character found in Genesis, according to Jewish tradition, there was a cosmic Adam. Cosmic Adam, who is understood in different ways by different mystical groups within Judaism. And he was called Adam Kadmon, or Adam Elyon, or Adam Elia. So these were three different names for this character, who is the cosmic Adam. Now, who is the cosmic Adam? Very interesting question. This is worthy of anybody's study if they're attracted to this. What you can say is that already in Jewish tradition, there was this concept that Adam was not just a human being, that at one point Adam was the prototype for the human being. And as the prototype, he was what we might call a manifestation of God. And and what for example, in the Sufi tradition was called the perfect man. Now, there is a great deal of literature in Hebrew, in the Kabbalah, in the Jewish tradition that pertains to Adam Kadmon and the meaning of Adam Kadmon. I won't try to summarize that. If that's of interest to you, I have a wiki link there. You can begin there. They've got a good bibliography, and then you can take it from there. All right. And so this was the Jewish tradition. Now, Adam didn't have the same sort of tradition within Christianity, although I haven't studied carefully enough the mystical references to Adam to know what influence there might have been from Jewish sources. However, we know that Adam is accounted a prophet of God in the Quran. And we know that also Adam is referred to as a human being. So in Islam, you have both meanings, but very briefly stated, not much detail there. And so the development would be written by various Muslim scholars. So there's a literature there. One of the handicaps we face, those of us who study Islamic tradition, is that most of the literature has never been translated into English. In fact, we're extremely hopeful that AI is going to make a huge difference in that, because we have friends who are translating texts regularly now and finding that AI is doing an excellent job from Arabic or Persian into English. So who knows? Maybe we're going to have a lot of that literature at some point. I want to transition now to the Bab. The Bab made statements in the Persian Bayan and in the Book of the Seven Proofs about two Adams who existed, one of them 12,000 years ago, another around 10,000 years ago. Of course, this is quite astonishing for anybody like myself, who had never seen any such thing in his life before I came across these references. And then, even more astonishing is I found a text, a tablet of Baha'u'llah, which had not yet been translated, but which some friends of mine helped me to translate when we were together at Irfan Colloquium. We had a gathering there. And this tablet was Baha'u'llah explaining that the Bab meant that these were historical figures. These were not symbolic. These were actual historical figures. Now, why do I find that so fascinating? Well, because we know that in the Gleanings, there is a reference to there being prophets and kings before Adam. Really? I know that might come as a big surprise to you, but you look in Gleanings and you do a search. You can do this on Baha'i Reference. It's the easiest way to find this. You go to Baha'i Reference, you select Gleanings, and then you pick the search option of only within that book. And you put in Adam, and at the very top will be like 3 or 4 references to this tablet of Baha'u'llah about prophets and the kings who preceded Adam. And so this is obviously what I'm doing here is I'm opening up the question, because we tend to think of Adam as being something very fixed in reality, where actually Adam is a very complicated creature because it can refer to multiple things. And so now we're going to go on to the sons of Adam. The sons of Adam, Cain, who is found also not just in the Pentateuch, in the Genesis, but also found in the Quran. and Abel, also in the Quran. And the story in those two sources is virtually identical, but in the Quran, it has a very interesting characteristic, which I would recommend that you look at, because it establishes a principle, and the principle being that whereas in the Bible, it asks the question, Cain asked the question, am I my brother's keeper? In the Quran, it says, you are your brother's keeper. It makes a positive statement. And then there is this contemporary scholar recently deceased, named Jawdat Said, who was from Syria. And I came across translations of his writings in Arabic online. It was absolutely fascinating because he came to the conclusion that the original intention, this story in the Quran, is to teach nonviolence, is to teach that it is never appropriate to respond to your fellow human being with violence. And he found this in this quotation from Quran. So at some point, I will give you a link to that book because I think you will find it very interesting reading. I must say, it got me looking at the whole question of violence in the Quran completely differently. I thought, it seems like we've misunderstood what the text actually was saying. And another thing that was fascinating is that in the biblical story, and it says that if anybody should harm Cain or kill him, in other words, that he will be punished sevenfold. Sevenfold. Okay, so apparently this is a very severe punishment for whosoever wants to avenge the death of Abel. This strengthens the argument in the Quran that this is a principle that must never be violated. You do not kill your brother. You do not kill your fellow human being. And of course, there are references to this in the Gospels of the correct relationship that should exist between Abel and Cain. Now, Cain had a son named Enoch, but this is not the famous Enoch. This famous Enoch is very briefly mentioned in the Bible, extremely briefly. I mean, we're talking about like 2 verses in the Hebrew and 2 verses in the Quran. And the difference between them is that in one book, his name is Hanoch, which is the Hebrew for Enoch. And in the Quran, his name is Idris. Now, how do we know it's the same person? Well, we know because this was recognized by all Muslim scholars for centuries now. But the real reason we know is because Baha'u'llah treats them as the same person, right? And so he says the following, based on the Quran. The Quran says Idris was a prophet of God, and he is actually the first prophet mentioned in the Quran by name, the very first in the text of the Quran. And whereas the text of Genesis tells us virtually nothing, it says that Hanoch walked with God and then he was taken up to God. That's it. That's all you get. But Idris has has generated a great deal of literature in Islam, Islamic writers, and responses to that literature in the writings of Baha'u'llah. Two of the tablets of Baha'u'llah I want to mention to you. One of them is called the Tablet of Wisdom. It's found among the tablets of Baha'u'llah written after the Kitab Aqdas. Look for it, Tablet of Wisdom. And if you read that tablet, you will come across a reference to the father of philosophy. And then there will be a footnote. And the footnote will explain that the father of philosophy was Idris, and that Idris is mentioned in the Quran. Another reference to Idris is found in the tablet of Baha'u'llah called the Law al-Basit al-Hakikah, which means the tablet of the uncompounded reality. Uncompounded means not put together with other pieces of other things. So it's about, of course, the essence of God. It's been translated by Dr. Mujan Momen. It's available online. Again, I can provide links to these things if anybody is interested. So why is Enoch interesting? Why is Enoch important? Because Enoch is seen by Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholarship as being the founder of divine philosophy. Now, you may not be familiar with the term divine philosophy, but it's mentioned a number of times in the talks of Abdul Baha, Promulgation of Universal Peace. Abdul Baha talks a lot about this subject, a lot, okay? And Baha'u'llah in the Law Hikmat, the whole theme of that Law Hikmat is about divine philosophy. And I'll give you one more little bit of interesting fact about divine philosophy, is when you look at the very end of the Kitab Aqdas, you will find a reference to the choice of one language for humanity as being one of the signs of the coming of age of humanity. And it says in this paragraph, it says, the other sign has already been mentioned in my tablets, and this is the firm foundation of this coming of age of humanity. And there's a footnote to it. And the footnote to it says that this is divine philosophy. So you see, this is going to be very important at some point in the future when we begin to study it. In fact, you might be interested to know that when Abdul Baha gave a talk at Columbia University, he said, you are doing this wonderful job of educating people in material sciences. And he said, God willing, you will learn to balance it with divine philosophy. So he actually said this at a university. He actually encouraged the university to develop a curriculum on divine philosophy. So Enoch is more than just deserving of two little mentions in the book of Genesis. He's worthy of a great deal of study. And in fact, some people have done a great deal, have written about him and written about this field of divine philosophy, including Stephen Lambden and some other people. Now we're going to go to Noah. Noah is much more familiar to people. we all know about Noah's Ark and that story. The story is not just two phrases, but they're the chapters 6 through 9 in Genesis, and in the Quran, chapters 3, 7, 17, and 37. So, he's regarded as a great prophet in the Quran. There are numerous references to Noah in the book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and the second epistle of Peter. And there's, as you probably recall, there's a passage in the Kitab Yagan by Baha'u'llah referring to Noah. So much could be said about Noah, but Noah is seen as being the beginning of a new cycle of humanity, because the previous group of humanity, with the exception of the family of Noah, was put to death, drowned in the deluge. And according to the story as it's told in the book of Genesis, had it not been for God's mercy, he wouldn't have allowed humanity to exist any longer. That's how disappointed he was with us. But because of his mercy, he not only allowed us to exist, but he gave us a sign that was to remind us that he will never destroy most of us the way he did in the time of Noah. As you can imagine, this is a story deep in symbolism. This is a story, and then we understand why it was referred to by Jesus, because Jesus was talking about a huge shift of civilization that was going to occur, and he likened this to the days of Noah. And I've put some verses there you can look up, and if you're not already familiar with those verses. And that symbol of God's mercy is what? Let's see if there's somebody out there who knows.
The
I see any
rainbow.
hands?
The rainbow.
The rainbow.
Yay!
Yes. Yay. I have to tell you, yesterday, my kids and I were driving down from Pike, where we live, down to Grass Valley, California. And there was a rainbow, the biggest rainbow I've ever seen in my life. Absolutely enormous. It took off. It took at least one entire side, like 180 degrees. And right there in front of us, we took like 20 pictures of it. Maybe I'll show some of them to you next time. But anyway, it was just such a joyful moment to see this absolutely gorgeous arc in the sky, and I think the point is that the rainbow is to remind us of the mercy of God, remind us that don't be afraid of your complete removal from existence. It won't happen. In this day and age, we need to be reminded that God has mercy on us, because certainly other human beings do not have mercy on us. So that is my story of Noah. And then we have the story of the Tower of Babel, which, as you know, it basically represented two problems. One problem was that humanity had become so arrogant that they thought that they're going to construct a building that goes all the way to heaven. This is, if you're familiar with the myth of Icarus, you know that Icarus was a son of Zeus who tried to do the same thing. He tried to go fly up to heaven, and then his wings were melted, That's wax holding the wings together, and he fell to earth. A wonderful metaphor for us, and the fact that no matter how high we rise, we have to remember that God is infinitely greater than us and infinitely more exalted than us. So this was one problem with the represented by the symbolism of the Tower of Babel, and the other one was the multiplication of languages. And Baha'u'llah refers briefly to the specific story of the multiplication of languages, but doesn't talk about the tower in this tablet that's translated in Gleanings. This is the same tablet where he talks about Adam and the prophets and messengers that appeared before Adam. Then also this, there's a reference in two of the surahs of the Torah, the Quran, about the story of the Tower of Babel. So as you see, the reason why I keep mentioning these multiple references is that many of the stories of the personalities, the important personalities of the Bible, of the Torah, of the Pentateuch, are found in the Quran. And as Baha'is, we would do very well to study those, to become familiar with them, because in many cases, the Quranic stories and the commentaries that were generated by those stories are bridges. They're bridges not only between the faith and Islam, but also bridges between Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the faith. So they walk across several dispensations because they're cited in those multiple holy books. So I have completed what I wanted to talk about today, because next time I'm going to talk about Abraham. And I didn't really want to enter into Abraham because when I talk about Abraham next week, I'll talk about his son and his grandsons and the relationships between them and the relation and what they tell us about humanity and how humanity has evolved. But if there's anything, if you have any questions or any comments, I'd be glad to hear them. Also, if Jeremiah wants to do this, he can take this document and I can send it to him and he can put it up on your website. And that will give you a bunch of things you can look up for further study or just to remind you. Okay? So now I wait for hands.
Taco.
You have to go.
Okay. And she said, do you want like me to pick you up or something?
So just real quick, everyone that's in here right now should be able to access the document that Peter is referencing in the chat. And I will have the link document for the videos right after we finish with this as well. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay, I have a raised hand from my friend Zabine.
This was really great, Peter. I appreciated what you did. For me, the stunner was when you said that before Adam, we're kings and manifestations, right? And the only thing that I could sort of relate to in what I called my current status versus your comment is that Baha'u'llah says before Adam were many Adams. And that sort of, that's where it came together for me. Am I right?
Yes, there are many Adams because Adam means man. but also because there have been many manifestations. manifestations didn't start coming 6,000 years ago. That's uh, that is a limited understanding of progressive revelation that was very common at the time that Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha were living, especially Abdu'l-Baha, because a lot of Christians had calculated things that way. And so he's speaking to them, and he's speaking to their understanding. What is he going to do? Abdu'l-Baha's going to say, you got it all wrong, guys. You're wrong. Adam's been here forever. No, he's not going to do that. He's going to speak to their capacity. And after all, he doesn't want them to be focused on what happened in the past. He wants to be focused on what happened now. The fact that the promised one has come. And so you don't want to, you stick to the you stick to the point. You stick to the dialogue that is going to bring people closer to the truth. And then later on, they'll find out there have been prophets before Adam. No, they don't have to worry about it now. And Baha'u'llah did that a lot. There are many of his tablets where he concludes by saying, don't worry about that stuff. What you need to pay attention to is what's happening now. This revelation, there's so much wisdom in that, because we can get lost in spiritual archaeology, you might call it. Like, let's find the origins of this idea. Good luck with that. Because we only have documents that actually that identify the history of many concepts. A lot of those documents are very very few and far between, and not so old. Yes, Sabine, go ahead.
One more thing,
Sabine.
Peter, one more thing. Okay, so we talk about Noah and what we call the wave of the new beginning, right? And if you have the wave of sort of the new beginning, it makes me think of them, the second wave, meaning the greater and lesser peace. Is that a good thought or not really?
Say it again. Say it again. I had a 5-year-old interrupt me.
Okay, God bless her. So you're talking about Noah, the deluge, right? And sort of the beginning of the calming down of what was prior to, and then with Noah, you had the new beginning, right? And would you think that, would it be, because to me, the Ba presents the combination of the prophetic cycle and Baha'u'llah opening up the 500,000 year cycle of starting with a lesser piece, culminating into a greater piece. Is that sort of another, what I call Noah-like moment?
Well, yes, definitely. And Jesus said it was going to happen. He talked about the time of the end will come and it will be like the time of Noah. He talked about that kind of huge change. That's huge. I mean, after all, it's not exactly the same as what happened in the time of Noah, but it's similar. It's similar, and it's also affecting all of humanity, not just the tribes of Israel, not just the Jewish people. This is also the significance of it, that it has this global impact. And certainly I think one of the understandings of it is that it's pointing to the age and the cycle which has begun. Yes, the enormity of this new cycle. And the other thing it's pointing to, and it should remind us, is that in this story of the beginning of a new cycle about Noah, it began with God's mercy. It did not begin with his justice. If it had begun with his justice, we'd probably all be obliterated by nuclear bombs. It's not going to happen. We're not going to be obliterated by nuclear bombs. We think we are. We're afraid of it. We're brandishing the bombs as if they were, javelins or spears. when they can actually kill billions of people, but we're not going to be destroyed in that way because God has promised us not to. And I think this is really important for us to realize, because people are living in such terror of what's going on in the world. And you know what? If you're scared, you can't do anything. You're frozen. You can't get on with your life and make a difference. And making a difference is all we're asked to do, right? So it's really important that we understand that our annihilation is not nigh. Our annihilation is, we are promised that the annihilation won't happen. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be calamities, very severe calamities, because we've done a lot of bad things. And so as humanity, we're going to suffer, and we are suffering, but the suffering will not result in the extinction of the human race. Are you there? Somebody? Let me see. I think I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of your lovely faces. There we go.
Yeah, it's such a great point you bring up, because we were just talking about the destruction of mankind, but you're right. I think all science would agree that we'll survive this one.
We have to. Otherwise, the whole meaning of religion is forfeited. You think about it. God has been promising us a golden age. It's not we're going to have a golden age on the planet Mars because we wiped out the entire Earth. No. Now maybe a few people can go with Elon Musk to Mars, but we're not all of us going there, are we? And how would we sustain our lives on Mars anyway? No, the planet Earth is where we belong, and it's so magnificent. For those of you who haven't traveled much, just get on YouTube and look at pictures of how absolutely gorgeous this planet is. It's fabulous.
Well, Peter, I'm glad. Sorry, I'm just glad you feel very confident about how beautiful this planet is, because hate to shatter your britches, but the Guardian, this is a pilgrim note, he said this is a hell end of all planets, so must be greater things to come. And the other thing is about being destroyed. Well, the Creator absolutely loves his creation, so that's the promise that the emanation from that love will never be destroyed, irrespective of anything. Sorry to butt in, I just got a bit excited. You know what I'm like, Peter. Indigenous people are not controllable.
I haven't seen Sharon in months.
I haven't seen
Sharon in months. Wonderful. I'm giving you a huge hug from California.
And back
That's
at
wonderful.
you and back at you and everybody else too, because I think hugs are quite therapeutic in today's world. Need a lot more of them.
Oh, I think. Absolutely.
Well, just to butt in with you, my dear Maori sister, Indigenous people of Turtle Island are very, very tightly controlled. Maoris, the haka of the Maoris, demonstrates a spirit that has been beaten and broken and bruised. I speak for it here in Turtle Island. I experienced here in this group today, we are very tightly controlled, especially by time. Allow
Pasu. And the other thing, while we're doing all this, before all the prophets in our oral tradition before Adam and our Indigenous prophets with wisdom to add to this, because we really are invisible, because we had an oral tradition and it's not written, as was, tablets and so on in the time of Adam and previous. So, but I'm trying to attend this because I think that it helps me unpack a lot of the damage that has been done to people by Christianity in terms of colonialism and colonization. And it's not my lack of love for His Holiness Christ or all of this. it's about unpacking that, because I deal mainly, well, hopefully, with other Indigenous people, and they're finding this step forward into this new phase of our development globally quite difficult. So thank you for your time, and love to all our whānau out there. Haere kate, all of that. Love you.
Thank you, Sharon. Peter, Eileen, if you guys would like to do a quick preview of next week, and then we can close out.
Oh, yes, Eileen, please.
All right. Well, what I have planned for next week is a very intensive program on the Exodus, coming from a historical viewpoint, coming from an archaeological viewpoint, coming from a very strong spiritual viewpoint, a little original thinking. It's going to be interesting. So that's about all I can say. And again, I posted on the share the link to go to the program on Exodus from a totally different viewpoint, from symbolism. And you might want to watch that also, stream it, because there are many, many ways to approach the Exodus, which is really the foundational story in the Pentateuch.
Okay, and I wanted to also make a correction. I do not actually have that link, Peter, to the document you were sharing today. So if you would be sure to email that to me or put it in the chat, and I'll make sure it gets put
Will
up.
do. I'll
And-
put it up, and it will be the same document that people can refer to, for future weeks. Okay?
All right, fantastic. Well,
And
anything else?
thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you all next week. 2
Thank
p.m.
you. That was great.
Bye.